Everything I Knit This Year 2023 edition.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora.
Hi, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me for another episode. Today, I have a video for you that I have been looking forward to since before I ever even started knitting, and that is Everything I Knit This Year 2023 edition. And this is going to be a special video for me for a few reasons. First of all, being this is the first time I'm documenting a lot of these things, as I started my YouTube channel here just a few months ago. So there are plenty of things that you haven't even seen yet. Additionally, I actually started knitting on January 1st of this year, 2023. It was in fact my New Year's resolution to learn how to knit, and I had absolutely no idea the places it would take me along the way. But I do feel just, I don't know, very fortunate that I was able to find a new craft, a new hobby that I could love so much and enjoy so many different aspects of, and then also bring that into this community space. And there's just a lot of new here, and it's all very exciting to me. So thank you so much for being here. I don't want to dilly-dally too much because I have a feeling this will be a little bit of a long one. So let's go ahead and dive on in. The very first thing that I knit was this black hat. It was knit out of an acrylic yarn that I literally went out and I bought knitting needles and this yarn at Walmart, I think on like December 31st of last year. And I said, I'm going to learn how to knit. I will knit a hat for my boyfriend. And that's exactly what I did. I have aunts who knit, and they had taught me when I was very young, but I think I knit like a few rows in a scarf, and that it wasn't for me at the time. So I had the gist of the like knit and purl were the main things that I needed to know how to do. I also had been watching some knitting podcasts prior to learning how to knit, as I was a crocheter. And I knew I was interested in knitting. So I was watching some knitting podcasts. So I had some ideas of like what maybe I should start with. But I decided that the way to go, well, the very first thing that I ever knit was actually this swatch. I literally sat down on New Year's Day and I just knit up this swatch, and I did knit back and forth, purl back and forth. I did, knit down, purl back. I did some ribbing. I was just playing with stitches. There was no end goal. And so knitting a hat was going to be the first time that there was an end goal, but I accepted from the get-go that it didn't have to be anything special. I knew it was my first knit. So I literally looked up on YouTube like ribbed hat because I wanted to make sure that I was practicing both my knit and purl stitches at an even rate so that I wouldn't feel like one was becoming comfortable and then the other not. And I've been trying to find the tutorial that I watched, but I couldn't find exactly the one that I had. So it was just a 1x1 ribbed hat, like simple, beginner, easy. I was using the absolute wrong size cabled circular needle. It was a fixed circular that I bought at Walmart, and it just was like, it was not quite short enough to go knit in the round easily, but it wasn't long enough to do magic loop. So I was just like stretching those stitches out. And then when I did get to the decreases, I wound up kind of trying to finagle the magic loop, and it was a little bit of a mess. I know that I got about halfway through, and I was going to try and show close-ups, but on the black yarn, you literally cannot even see. But I had made a mistake somewhere, and it was my first time, it was my first time doing everything. So it was my first time then trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I rip back? How do I do that? And I managed to figure that out. I managed to pull the needles out, rip back, pick up new stitches, but all of the new stitches were actually facing the wrong way when I picked them up. So there are, and I think that this happened twice over the course of the whole hat. So there are a couple of spots where just things look a little bit off, but for a first project, I wasn't mad. It's a very warm hat. My boyfriend still wears it. And that was the very first thing I ever knit. After that, I knit a hat for myself. I had a skein of this red superwash. I think it's Plymouth Merino DK yarn in this red color. And it was left over from a crochet project. And I actually believe that I followed the same exact tutorial. However, I decided to start going rogue, like second project, and I thought I knew what I was doing. So I did 2x2 ribbing. I know, very ambitious. But I managed to figure that out. I figured, it's an even amount of stitches, so I'll just do 2 and 2 instead of 1 by 1. And again, I had a mistake and I wanted to go back and fix it. My thought process being that if there was, I'm going to make mistakes, so I might as well find out how to fix those on these like low stake projects. What was the worst that could happen? I would have to rip out the entire hat. And realistically, I think each of these hats took me about a week to knit. So having come from a crochet background, I wasn't so nervous about starting over. Like, that wasn't something that was freaking me out. So I know that also in my red hat, there are a couple of parts where I had ripped out. And then I think that was when I started to figure out that the stitches were twisted when I had put them back on the needles. But there is still that little jog or something in there. However, I love that hat. It fits me really well. And for the most part, the part where there's a little discrepancy, it's hidden under the folded brim, so not that big an issue. This was all in preparation to knit my first sweater. And having come from the crochet background, and this is just my experience, but I had only ever followed a crochet pattern once before. Other than that, I was just freestyling on what I knew. So I didn't see why I should pay for a knitting pattern. Like, that didn't make sense to me. So the first resource that I found for free knitting patterns was Drops Design. And I had purchased this Patton's Paradiso cotton yarn. And I believe that I bought 10 or 11 balls of it. But I bought it at the thrift store for $1 each. And when I purchased it, it was with the idea that this will be the yarn I will use to knit my first sweater, because if I hate it, if I don't enjoy it, if I'm not liking it, then it was a very, very low investment. So I knit the Sandy Shore sweater by Drops Design using that cotton yarn, and the yarn has a slubbiness or a thick and thin texture to it. The sweater is a raglan sweater that's knit from the top down. There is no short row shaping in it, and it features these little eyelets in the raglan increases. And it seems like a great project to hone in on knitting in the round and just knit stitches, but then to have something interesting and to be learning constantly. I felt like I got the knit and purl thing down after the 2 hats. So I wanted something new, and that was the eyelets for me. And I knit that sweater, I want to say, in about a month. I will say that when it comes to being a beginner knitter, something that I embraced and would, pass on to another beginner, and really anything, is once you actually figure out how to knit and purl, knitting a sweater isn't necessarily more advanced than knitting a hat. And the reason I say that is because 99% of the project is just knitting in the round. If you're knitting a simple sweater. And I think a raglan sweater is a great place to start because you are learning to increase. If you've already knit a hat and you've learned to increase or decrease, then you have more or less an understanding of that skill. And so when it comes to then adding in something like an eyelet in the raglan increase, it is such a small percentage of the whole project that it makes it so that you can learn so much without knitting 10 scarves and then finally knitting a sweater. If you know how to knit and you know how to purl, you know how to cast on, then the rest is you just have to take it in bite-sized pieces as you go. Because also, once you've finished the raglan increases, you're knitting stockinette in the round for as long as you want to. So there's so few new things in a sweater. And for those reasons, I feel like if you're a beginner and sweaters are scaring you, don't let them. Figure out your knits, figure out your purls, maybe knit up a swatch and just look up how to do some basic increases, and then go find yourself a simple raglan sweater and just bite-sized pieces. Remember that once you get through those increases, it's back to the thing that you already knew how to do, the knitting in the round. So I dove in, I knit this sweater. The fabric that the Patents Paradiso makes is actually very soft for cotton. It's actually super, super soft. I'm sure it's gonna pill pretty quickly. I haven't worn it much because the neckline is just absolutely massive on this sweater, to the point where I pretty much just wear it off of the shoulder. And it's also the colors so wildly unflattering on me. But that was a project. That was the first sweater that I knit. And I believe that took me about a month. Then I wound up having so much of this yarn left over that I actually decided to make a little lounge set for myself. So I knit a pair of shorts. That was my very next project. It was another drops pattern. This was the Prairie Rose shorts pattern. And oh, by the way, I did not do a gauge swatch for any of these things. I went into these projects knowing that if they didn't work out, it was okay. Like, that was not even part of the process of it for me. It was not about having my new favorite sweater ever at the end of it. It was just about knitting a sweater and seeing how that went. If it was too small, who knows? If it was too big, who cares? Like, it did not matter. It was just the process. And I got lucky because they both actually do fit. But the shorts are the Prairie Rose shorts. And this was the first time doing any sort of shaping. This pattern included wrap and turns for raising the back of the shorts. And I know that that was not a very seamless process for me. And also following the drops pattern left you with like a little to be desired in the way of explaining that. So it didn't go perfectly, but I cannot even be mad at it. And from what I remember, you knit double the width of the waistband, and then that was folded down and seamed. And then it was just knitting in the round with those wrap and turns at the top of the back of the pants until basically it got to like the crotch, and then you would split, right? I think then you split for the two legs, and then in the end, the crotch was just seamed up. So it was actually pretty simple. I also knit an I-cord for the tie on it. So that was my first time doing that. I know I didn't love that process, but overall, it was fun. Again, there was so much familiar with just knitting in the round that the bite-sized pieces that were new, like the I-cord, like the wrap and turns, were manageable. So those were the first couple of garments. At this point, I had a couple of friends who were getting married in Vegas, and we went on a trip to go be at their wedding. And I was like, oh, I have to bring a pair of socks to knit on the plane. That's what people do. So I started literally like the night before. I decided I was going to cast on a pair of 2 at a time toe up socks for my boyfriend in Patton's Croy sock yarn. And I did. I knit on those throughout the plane ride there, a little bit while we were there, and then on the plane home, and ultimately decided that I just didn't enjoy the process of it, and they've been sitting ever since. I also realized at some point that I totally forgot I was going to have to stop at some point and add a heel in. I was basically just like, I had looked up how to start this, and I figured, well, there's no way I'll get to the heel by the time, for while I'm in Vegas. So I'll figure out the rest when I come home. And then I was just sort of knitting on them mindlessly. So ultimately I decided that they will get an afterthought heel when they're done. But I wound up just putting them aside because I just wasn't loving them. However, pulling them out today, I feel like they look pretty cool. So I did want to include a couple of those not as successful projects because this is my first year of knitting. So I wanted to show some of those things that didn't work out or just I wasn't loving. But 2 at a time toe up socks, I feel like was very ambitious of me. And I got through the hard part. It was just like little tubes of magic loop. Ugh, my least favorite. So that was that. At this point, it was coming around to March when my birthday is. And I had decided that for my birthday, I really wanted to knit a cable knit sweater for which I would purchase the yarn on my birthday. So I planned a whole yarn tour, a yarn shop tour across Connecticut. And we went to, I think, 5 different yarn shops that day. And the plan, was to purchase yarn for a cable knit sweater. Now, in the time of me deciding that was my plan and then actually it being my birthday, I had seen the designer who I had been eyeing since prior to picking up knitting needles, was Knitonomy, Magdalena Parker. I had seen a few of her projects, her designs, and I had been following her on Instagram, and she posted a call for a test knit. And that was for this beautiful cable knit sweater. And at the time, I hadn't decided which cable knit sweater I wanted to knit yet, but this one just looked like exactly what I wanted. It was oversized. It had these beautiful little cables, and I just loved the look of it. And the deadline for the test knit was about a month after my birthday, if I'm not mistaken. So I decided to apply, and I got accepted for the test knit without really realizing like what I was getting myself into. And on my birthday, we went out looking for yarn to knit up this sweater. So this is the Minto sweater by Magdalena Parker at Knitonomy. And I had a very quick reality check. I didn't realize how much yarn was going to cost. It was my birthday, so I was willing to splurge a little bit, but it was also a big part of me feeling comfortable signing up for the test knit was that she did have it in the sort of stipulations that if you need to bail on this test knit at any time, that was okay as long as you gave her notice. So I didn't want to go ahead and commit to purchasing like $200, $300 worth of yarn for this one sweater that what if I got halfway through and couldn't figure out the cables and it was a mess and it all blew up in my face. So we wound up actually after all the yarn stores at a Hobby Lobby, and I purchased this clearance yarn. It was Yarn Bee Must Be Merino in the colorway Tobacco. And I think it was literally on clearance for like $2 a ball. And the thing was I needed a lot of it for this sweater. This sweater eats up a lot of yarn. So this is the Minto sweater light version. And I knit mine in the size C. So it's it is the biggest one, I think. But in the lighter version, it's small. Anyway, all of the details are on Ravelry for this sweater. Prior to this point, Ravelry was not a thing. And after this point, I have not been the best at keeping Ravelry updated, but I'm trying to get better at it. So yeah, this is just a top-down drop shoulder cable knit sweater. First time doing drop shoulder. So first time knitting like the back panel and then picking up the shoulders, picking up the sleeves. First time doing Italian bind off. It definitely involved some tears. I could not figure it out to save my life when I messed something up. I was about halfway through the Italian bind off and I don't know what the heck I did, but suddenly it didn't look right. And the way that my brain could not figure out what I did wrong or how to fix it, now looking at it, I actually couldn't even find the part that was messed up. So that just goes to show you too that those, what do I say? The imperfections are what makes something so perfectly handmade. I also know that somewhere, I think on one of the sleeves, there is a cable that's either going the wrong way or just didn't get its cable twist at all. And I let that be. I said, that's okay. And yeah, this is probably one of my most worn sweaters, just the sheer oversizedness of it. I will say, so the yarn is 50% wool and then 25% acrylic and 25% nylon. This is that infamous yarn from Rhinebeck, if you saw that video. And it has a ton of spring to it and it's very heavy, which is not the greatest for this construction, but I still wear it a ton. The only thing that if I cared more, I would probably go back in and lengthen the sleeves a little bit. They do hit me a little bit higher than I would have liked for them to. I assumed that in blocking, the body would stretch out a little bit more, giving the sleeves more length. But also I'm 5'7". My measurements are in the description, by the way. So I think I'm just a little bit taller than this pattern was meant for. But an easy fix, just know that if you are knitting this sweater, I think a lot of the testers wound up adding length to their sleeves, and it all just depends on how that body blocks out with the drop shoulder and all that. So just be wary. But this is, to date, I think my boyfriend's favorite sweater that I've knit, one of mine, and it was a very proud moment for me. I'm very proud of this sweater. So that's the Minto by Magdalena Parker, Knitonomy. Oh, and I think, I believe that sweater also took me about a month to knit. Yeah. After that, I was interested in my first year of knitting. I really wanted to try and sort of run the gambit of just like all of the different things I could possibly do. I wanted texture, lace, color work, all of it. Did I get to all of it? Not so much. After the Minto, I really enjoyed the texture, so I decided that I wanted another textured knit, and this time I wanted it to be a cardigan. So I cast on the Corsabin cardigan by Tanya Hodney, and if that's sounding familiar but looking a little bit different to you, that's because I am currently knitting a second version of this same cardigan, but this was my first. This was also knit out of the Yarn Bee Must Be Merino, but it was their thicker yarn, but also purchased on my birthday on clearance. I want to say that these were $3 a ball. And it works a lot better in this cardigan than it does in my sweater. However, it is still a little bit on the heavy side. It's the same content of the Minto sweater, but this cardigan is also knit from the bottom up. And then, of course, it's a cardigan. So it's knit flat. And then it features this basket weave pattern, a V-neck, and then the ribbed button band. So much new was happening here. It calls for an Italian cast on. I remember trying that and saying, forget it. If you get hung up here, you're never going to finish this sweater. So just do your standard long tail cast on. And that's what I did. Knit the ribbing, you knit your basket weave all the way up to the V-neck and split. And then you knit your fronts, your back, pick up for sleeves. And they are kind of a balloon sleeve where they quickly taper at the very end of the cuff and then just a little bit of ribbing on the cuff and then picking up for that whole ribbed button band. So I enjoyed this knit a whole bunch. I found the basket weave to be extremely rhythmic and satisfying. It's my favorite type of handmade thing where the payoff is so extravagant and intricate looking, but the process is so much more simple than it appears. So this is a favorite knit of mine for those reasons. I bought these beautiful little shell buttons for the button band, and I attached them using embroidery thread. That was something that I think I heard Rebecca Clow mention in one of her podcasts, the Crayabea. And this is another, I'm probably going to say that they're all my favorite, but this is another favorite of mine. The color of it, I just adore. I will say that I think I wound up finishing this one in around late April probably. So it was almost like a little bit too warm to wear it by the time I finished it. And then fall felt like a little too chilly to wear something that my chest would be out because I do prefer to wear this with like almost as a blouse. But I love the look of it, and I'm sure that in the spring I'll get a lot more wear out of this one. So that's the Corsavin cardigan by Tanya Honey. So on my birthday, I also at Hobby Lobby purchased, they had Patton's Croy sock yarn in this lavender color, and it was on like mega clearance. I think that this was $1 or $2 a ball. I don't know. I know that all of the yarn that I bought on my birthday came out to something like $50, and it was literally 3 sweaters quantity. So it was a good find at Hobby Lobby. So this was a Patton's Croy sock yarn in this lavender colorway. And I think that I then saw this pattern come through my Ravelry. And between the color and then the color of the yarn that I had, it just seemed like a perfect marriage. This is the Province Top by Ekaterina Vorobeva. And basically, this is a bottom up short sleeve top that features this beautiful lace work in the yoke. And it's done so in this sort of sweetheart top in the solid yarn, and then the lace work on the whole yoke, the back, and the sleeves. And this was, at this point, the finest gauge that I would be knitting for a garment. So it took me a long time to get through the whole bottom up stockinette part of this. And then you split for the front and back. And then start with the lace work on the back. And basically, this was the first time that I got a rude awakening on the fact that you should always read your pattern all the way through before you begin, because I made my way through all of the lace work on the back and thought that I was ready to start the whole sweetheart neck and lace on the front when I went to the next page of the pattern, and basically the instructions for the lace work went to the bottom of that page. And then the very first instruction on the next page was, while at the same time increasing. And I didn't do that the whole time. So I actually finished the entire lace work on the back, and I was pretty devastated when I saw that instruction. Totally defeated me. Put this aside, and at some point I ripped the needles out of it and just started ripping back. I have high hopes of finishing this project someday, but I'm still very hurt by it. So for now, you can see the lace on the back. It was beautiful. And I think that it's supposed to mimic little lavender flowers or something. I don't know. It's very beautiful, the pattern. But yeah, this one was a shame. Now, at this point, we were in the summer, and I needed like an easy win. I needed something that was going to be pretty simple to work on, but I didn't care that it wasn't going to be a summer knit. At this point, I didn't need a summer knit. You know, I was still just like trying to figure out everything. And I actually believe that I had just thrifted some light lopey, right? Is it called light lopey or let lopey? I don't have the labels anymore. But I wanted to just find a simple raglan top-down sweater that I could use this yarn for. And I wound up going with the warm-up sweater by Espace Tricot. And this is one of their free patterns. So I felt, again, low stakes. I felt comfortable just going in and experimenting. And I had quite a few different colors of this light lopey, and none of it on its own was a sweater's quantity, but altogether it was about a sweater's quantity of yarn, plus or minus a little bit. So then I also grabbed some random black unspun yarn that I had in my stash, thrifted stash. And I just was playing. So this was now first time doing German short rows. This pattern is a top-down raglan. There are short row shaping in the back. And I did not know that you could like spit splice wool. So I did all of this striping down the sweater, just trying to use up all of the different random yarn quantities that I have. So I had no game plan going into it. I just started striping however I saw fit and never woven the ends. Um, totally finished this sweater in like July and threw it into a corner and never blocked it because it's an unspun wool yarn in the middle of July. I remember trying this on when it was literally like 90 degrees. It was so brutal. But I dug it out today and I'm like, man, I gotta block this sweater. Like it literally still has the stitch markers from the decreases on the sleeves. That is just how like I just wanted something simple to have on the needles. I did. I finished it. I threw it aside and here we are. So I think I'll block that soon and manage the ends somehow because there's so many. Once I finished that, I really did enjoy the warm-up sweater pattern by Espace Tricot, and my sister was actually going on her honeymoon, and I had seen these Karen Blossom cakes. They are acrylic and cotton. It's a cotton tube with acrylic fibers blown into it in that chainette construction. So I decided to actually knit one of these for her to take to California on her honeymoon. It's just something to throw on a chilly evening on the beach or whatever she was doing. And the color that I saw in the Karen Blossom cake was just like had her name written all over it. So I actually knit her one of these sweaters, and I may or may not have split the hem on that one. That's how you know I really liked the pattern. I mean, it was simple, it was easy, it was quick, and just like a breath of fresh air after the trauma of the lace on the Provence top. So yes, I knit 2 of those warm-up sweaters over the summer, and then I actually started my all good dress, which would have been the first project that you guys saw on the channel when I started it. So this is another pattern by Magdalena Parker of Knitonomy. When I tell you that her patterns are just so clearly written, and I'm sure for some people they would say it's maybe too much information, but for a beginner, oh my gosh, her patterns are a dream. So I can't recommend them more. And this was really my dream knit. This was the thing that before I started knitting, I saw this come up on Instagram and I was like, I want to learn how to knit so I can have that. And so over the summer, I did a big yarn purchase for the sort of future projects I had in mind. And the yarn for this dress was one of those things. So this is the Hertigarn Lana Cotton 212 in the colorway 0809. And it's a cotton merino blend, superwash merino. This was knit in a very fine gauge. It's a fingering weight maxi dress, basically. And it's a drop shoulder construction. It features folded hems. So that was the new technique I was learning here. And I loved every bit of this. This is my pride and joy. I love this dress. I will say by the time I finished it, it was getting a little too chilly to wear it. And I'm sure I could wear it. I mean, I'm sure I could style it for the winter. I just haven't really yet. But I adore this dress and I cannot wait for spring to come so that I can wear it again. It was a total labor of love, but it did take me exactly 2 months to knit. This was also the first time that we really celebrated a finished object by going out and doing a photo shoot. I enjoy doing this and really want to get better at doing it for every finished object because the whole time I'm knitting it, I have a vision of like that first outfit I'm going to wear with the knit, and I like sort of honoring it and all of the effort that went into knitting it. So I very much enjoyed this photo shoot and getting to just show off all of that work. I'm very proud of this piece. My favorite details on this one, she gives you the breakdown for how many stitches to pick up in the different parts of the neckline, which to me create this just really beautiful sort of like hexagonal shape in the neckline, and I think it just makes it look very rich, very expensive. And then I learned so much doing these folded hems. On the sleeves, I discovered that the folded hem was flaring a little bit, and so I decided to try to mitigate that in the actual hem by dropping down a needle size for the part of the hem that was actually folded on the inside of the fabric, and that worked so well. So I'm really proud of myself for figuring out those things and how to navigate making this exactly what I wanted it to be. And I just can see this dress being in my life for forever. I love the color that it's knit in. It's a very neutral, cool brown. The yarn itself has this sort of gray and then brown marl to it. So it's that perfect neutral. It goes great with black, it goes great with white, but then I'm sure that it could be richened up a bit with more of chocolatey browns. So I'm really glad that I decided to go for that yarn, and I just love this one. It was a great knit. Love that one. That's my all good dress. At this point, I also knit up a cute little baby gift for my sister's best friend. She had a baby, and my sister asked if I could knit a bunny for the baby. So I found this free pattern, the Snuggle Bunny Lovey by Kayla Pins. It is this very primitive, just sort of like little blankie with bunny ears that get tied together at the top. And I found this to be just like the most darling little thing. I knit this in some thrifted Barocco Modern Cotton DK. What a fantastic yarn. I loved working with that yarn. It's so soft, and the stitch definition is unreal. You start this project with the hem, the little like outer border, and then you decrease your way to the little bunny ears, and then you literally just tie off you tie off the head of that little bunny, and it just is the sweetest little knit. I love this one. Highly recommend for a little baby. And this was my first time using DPNs. So thoroughly enjoyed the process of using DPNs, and wish that I had switched to them sooner because I was terrified to. And I started on circular needles for the hem. And then as I was decreasing, I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to switch to magic loop or DPNs. And I was so afraid. And then finally I just said, you know what, let's just try the DPNs and see how that goes. And I loved it. So that was a fun discovery for that one. And it was a very quick, easy peasy knit, like could be done in a weekend. I think it took me about a week though. Now, at this point, I did start my second Corsaven cardigan. This is still a work in progress. So I wanted to include some works in progress because to really encapsulate everything that I knit in 2023, I mean, these are all the stitches that I've made. Just because they didn't actually make it to fruition in the year, I feel like doesn't mean that they're not something I knit in 2023. So this is still a work in progress. This is knit using the Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool, 100% wool, and the colorway oatmeal. And yeah, just the same thing. I've modified the sleeves a touch, but my goal really is to finish this by 2024. That would be ideal. Now we have my ranunculus, which I feel like I have to thank this pattern for. I mean, really, this is where you guys caught me when I started my channel, was wanting to knit this sweater just to find out why the heck does everyone make this? And like, what's the hype? What's the big deal? And then you guys were laughing with me along the way as I experienced all of the trials and tribulations of this pattern. And in the end, like, it's beautiful. I knit this using Malabrigo Susurro in the colorway Frank Ochre. It is a silk merino linen blend. The yarn, I mean, the fabric is like the drapiest thing. Folded, it becomes like paper. It's a bizarre sort of thing. It creases very easily. That's the linen, I'm sure, but it has the most stunning luster to it. And then the stitch definition in all of the lace work is just so beautiful. And this is one that was my first time really navigating knitting something wildly off gauge. This sweater, I actually knit the size 10 but I was using needle size 4.5 millimeter to get the most comfortable fabric for me. I really struggled with the whole yoke and getting that right. It took a few tries. Still, the neckline on this is just like a touch more snug than I would like for it to be. Just a touch. I can get it over my head, but I have to be pretty cautious. The twisted rib on the bottom, I think, is stunning. I love the sort of balloon sleeves and just how light this sweater is. But I feel like I can't say too much about it again because I only finished this last month in November, and it was a little too chilly to wear such a thin sweater, long sleeve shirt type garment. So I think that this is going to really shine come this spring. But for now, it's just a beautiful piece. I love the color. Frank Ochre, my favorite. And I'm very, I said like the theme, I'm very proud of myself. No, I really do feel like I tackled all of these little things along my journey of knitting in this first year, and this was such a testament to like I want to know how to do these things in knitting, and I will figure it out. So that was really cool, and just to be kind of part of like the ranunculus club was also cool. But I also just can't deny the way in which knitting this sweater really transformed my channel here as well. So thank you if you joined me during the fiasco of knitting the ranunculus. So that is my ranunculus by, of course, Midori Hirose. And yeah, I love it. At the same time, I was working on my now I keep forgetting how to say it, Lika pullover by Sari Nordland. It's a top-down drop shoulder sweater, and it features these stripes, which I chose to use a boucle yarn in the stripes that would contrast with the wool and alpaca silk combo that I had going on in the rest of the sweater. So actually, this was my first time using 2 strands of yarn at once. And I knit the main color or the majority of the sweater using 2 different cones of yarn that I had purchased at Webb's America's Yarn store. One of them was just 100% wool, and the other is an alpaca silk blend. And then the boucle stripes are actually also 2 strands of 2 different boucles. Both are a little bit of a mystery as they're both thrifted yarns, but one has a really like soft, very just soft feel to it. And then the other, I believe, is a mohair boucle, and it's very fine and has a little bit more of like a scratchiness about it. But together, they gave me the exact amount of like contrast and dimension that I wanted in the sweater. I was so afraid of this coming out looking like a Charlie Brown sweater or something. And so I really embraced the idea of these stripes being very low contrast, but more emphasizing the textural differences. And what I really love about this one is the way that the like chevron is made. It creates these like sort of lacy, I don't know, stripes that go like vertical stripes throughout it. But then where the boucle stripes are, they really close up all of those gaps, making the contrast that much more noticeable. And yet it's still so subtle. So this has definitely been worn a ton already since finishing it. This sweater took me a little over a month to complete. And it was, yeah, a testnet for Sari Nordland. I love this sweater. I love the fit of this so much. I enjoy the boxiness, and then the sleeves I feel like really wound up being just the right length for me. So there's so much I love about this sweater. It's definitely a staple in my wardrobe. And the next sweater that I knit this year was my first time knitting a vest. So this was also my first time really pushing the boundaries of adapting or modifying a pattern to fit the vision that I had. So this was my Thanksgiving Day vest based off of the pattern So Frill Blouse by Nadine Jouerg-Valvel, Madame Valvel Knits. And I just modified the bejeebies out of this pattern. It is traditionally knit with these cabled sleeves, and it's meant to be a fitted bodice, primarily knit in this cable. It's a very micro cable that looks like ribbing from afar. And really what caught my eye with this pattern was the ruffle on the sort of like sleeve, I guess. And the juxtaposition between that just sort of like girliness of the ruffle, but then the masculinity of the more structured neckline on this one. It has this V-neck crossover sort of button placket Henley style neckline, and I just feel like it balances out the ruffles so nicely. I knit this one using another thrifted yarn. I guess I didn't realize actually how much I had used my thrifted yarns this year, but go me. I did. So this was knit using the Pekapeds, I think it's called the American Alpaca Company. I never remember. And in the colorway Harvest. And I held that with a strand of Drops mohair in their chocolate colorway. This was another pattern where my gauge was really off. So I actually knit this vest in the largest size in the pattern, and I was still working. I was working at a bigger gauge. So my project was going to wind up being even bigger than the project had originally, or the largest size had like called for, I guess. And it fits literally perfectly because I didn't want that fitted silhouette. I wanted something that was going to be a little bit more boxy and oversized. I definitely feel like I got it with all of the changes that I had made. I wound up knitting this straight down after splitting for the sleeves in just plain stockinette. And then I did a split twisted rib hem on this vest. And the ruffles were way more work than I thought they were going to be. And I was really down to the wire trying to get this one done for Thanksgiving. So I wound up skipping out on the second ruffle that's included in the pattern. But personally, I actually feel like now that I've worn this a few times, it's perfect the way that it is. I thought at some point I might go back and add a second ruffle, but as it is right now, I do really love the finished object of this one. This vest only took me just over 2 weeks to knit. So I was also just really impressed with how quickly I was able to get this garment out, even though I was working on a smaller needle. So I was just really happy that I was able to squeeze this one out just in time for Thanksgiving. The next finished object that I had this year was the very silly To Space and Beyond hat, free pattern by Purl Soho. And this was knit using some more thrifted yarn, the Knit Collage Purl Soho Comet in their colorway Deep Space. It's that crazy craft yarn, and I found this at the thrift store. 3 skeins for $2 a piece when originally this yarn goes for about $56, something like that. So I knit this into a hat for a little kiddo that I'm hoping to give to her by the end of the year. I still have yet to add on. I want to do a fleece lining and a fun tulle pom-pom. So I haven't gotten around to that just yet, but that was the next finished object. And this literally took a day to knit up. I mean, it was on those chunky needles that I don't love working with at all, but the whole hat took a single skein of yarn and it took a day. So I can't even be mad about it. Really rounding out all of the things that I knit this year, the next thing that I have to show you is my Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague, which I am knitting out of hedgehog fibers, skinny singles in the colorway Orca. And this is a hat that I'm knitting for my boyfriend. I also picked up this yarn at the Stars Hollow, what is it called? Stars Hollow yarn, something like that. And it was the first time that I really ran into someone who had seen the channel in the wild. And that was really cool. So that was just a fun experience that I had this year. And a memorable one of picking out that yarn that I had been hunting for so long, just the right color to knit my boyfriend a hat in a sort of gray, black, variegated colorway, and I love the color of this one. So that is still an active whip that is most likely going to come with me into 2024, but I have gotten just about halfway through it, so I definitely wanted to make sure I mentioned it here. And last but certainly not least, this project is something that I regret not having finished in time to film this video, but is the absolute perfect punctuation to finish this video off because it is my ultimate dream knit, being the Augustine's number 25 by Anne-Sophie Velling. This is another pattern that I saw very early in my knitting career and just knew immediately it was going to be my Christmas dress. So as I am filming, I am days away from Christmas and so close to finishing this dress. I really hope that I do, but we are going to be cutting it close. And it is so symbolic of just how much I've learned and how much I have grown since January 1st of this year to now. Looking at this dress, I can see all of the techniques and the ways that I have developed and honed this skill that I have been learning in the most beautiful, like spectacular project of my knitting career so far. This dress is surprisingly easier than it looks. Another one of those things where I just love that the effort that's gone into it has been so minimal compared to the efficacy of the finished product. It features the most stunning honeycomb cables and these delicious puffy sleeves. I've been knitting this whole thing out of Drops Fabelle and Drops Brushed Alpaca silk, and it has taken surprisingly little time to knit just based on how big of the project is overall. So I don't know, it just feels like the pinnacle of 2023 knitting, and I love showing off the different skills all in it. I mean, this dress has everything from the cables to more 3-needle bind-offs and folded hems. I have yet to learn the picot bind-off, but I will be soon. And so I feel like it is the perfect way to wrap up in just a pretty red bow everything that I knit in 2023, my first year of knitting. Oof. This video took, I think, a lot longer than I anticipated to film, but I do feel like this is the most rewarding way to really gain perspective on all of the things I was able to achieve this year in a year of knitting alone, but especially being the first year that I've been knitting. And when I tell you that there's no way I could have anticipated this is how the year would be ending when I started this year, that is the understatement of the year. In the words of my best friend, she said, I gotta tell you, I did not have you becoming a knitting YouTuber. That was not on my bingo card for this year. And I have to agree. It's been random, it's been impulsive, and it's been fun and exciting and stressful and chaotic and rewarding and heartwarming and just the absolute adventure. I cannot tell you how excited I am to see what all 2024 has in store for us. So I think that's everything. If you have any questions about this laundry list of things that I knit, how many was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 things. They're not all finished, but I did knit 17 things this year. I guess technically 18 if you count the socks as 2. I've learned a countless amount of things, and I have just enjoyed the experience. I have so many thoughts for 2024 that I'm going to reserve that for a different video entirely, because otherwise we might just be here all day. And with that, I'd love to know, what was your favorite thing that you knit this year? And if you have a favorite thing that I knit this year, I'd be curious to know that too. Also, if there's anything that you want to see from me in 2024, please let me know. I love for this to be an interactive space for both of us to get something out of it. So with that, friends, if you're new here, I would love it if you would come hang out with us more often. I post podcast videos every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you liked this video, please do consider giving it a thumbs up. You can ring the bell, and like I said, please do consider subscribing. That's all I've got for you. All right, you guys, big ol' thanks for watching. Big ol' Happy New Year, and I'll catch you on the next one. All right, bye!